He gave vent to a prodigious whistle as I imparted the news.
"Great Scott! You were right then. I couldn't believe it at the time."
"No, it is astonishing until you get used to the idea and see how it makes everything fit in. Now, what are we to do? Of course it will be generally known tomorrow." John reflected.
"Never mind," he said at last. "We won't say anything at present. There is no need. As you say, it will be known soon enough."
But to my intense surprise, on getting down early the next morning and eagerly opening the newspapers, there was not a word about the arrest. There was a column of mere padding about the Styles poisoning case, but nothing further. It was rather inexplicable, but I suppose that for some reason or other, Japp wished to keep it out of the papers. It worried me just a little, for it suggested the possibility that there might be further arrests to come. After breakfast, I decided to go down to the village and see if Poirot had returned yet. But before I could start, a well-known face blocked one of the windows, and the well-known voice said,
"Bonjour, mon ami."
"Poirot!" I exclaimed with relief, and seizing him by both hands, I dragged him into the room. "I was never so glad to see anyone. Listen, I have said nothing to anybody but John. Is that right?"
"My friend," replied Poirot, "I do not know what you are talking about."
"Dr. Bauerstein's arrest, of course," I answered impatiently.
"Is Bauerstein arrested, then?"
"Did you not know it?"
"Not the least in the world."
But pausing a moment, he added,
"Still, it does not surprise me. After all, we are only 4 miles from the coast."
"The coast?" I asked, puzzled. "What has that got to do with it?" Poirot shrugged his shoulders.
"Surely it is obvious."
"Not to me. No doubt I am very dense, but I cannot see what the proximity of the coast has got to do with the murder of Mrs. Inglethorpe."
"Nothing at all, of course," replied Poirot, smiling. "But we were speaking of the arrest of Dr. Bauerstein."
"Well, he is arrested for the murder of Mrs. Inglethorpe."
"What?"
cried Poirot in apparently lively astonishment.
"Dr. Bauerstein arrested for the murder of Mrs. Inglethorpe?"
"Yes."
"Impossible. That would be too good a farce. Who told you that, my friend?"
"Well, no one exactly told me," I confessed. "But he's arrested."
"Oh, yes, very likely. But for espionage, mon ami."
"Espionage?" I gasped.
"Precisely."
"Not for poisoning Mrs. Inglethorpe?"
"Not unless our friend Japp has taken leave of his senses,"
replied Poirot placidly. But I thought you thought so too." Poirot gave me one look which conveyed a wondering pity and his full sense of the utter absurdity of such an idea. "Do you mean to say," I asked, slowly adapting myself to the new idea, "that Dr. Bauerstein is a spy?" Poirot nodded.
"Have you never suspected it?"
"It never entered my head."
"It did not strike you as peculiar that a famous London doctor should bury himself in a little village like this, and should be in the habit of walking about at all hours of the night, fully dressed?"
"No," I confessed. "I never thought of such a thing."
"He is, of course, a German by birth," said Poirot thoughtfully, "though he has practised so long in this country that nobody thinks of him as anything but an Englishman. He was naturalized about 15 years ago. A very clever man. A Jew, of course."
"The blackguard!" I cried indignantly.
"Not at all. He is, on the contrary, a patriot. Think what he stands to lose. I admire the man myself."
But I could not look at it in Poirot's philosophical way. "And this is the man with whom Mrs. Cavendish has been wandering about all over the country?" I cried indignantly.
"Yes, I should fancy he had found her very useful," remarked Poirot. "So long as gossip busied itself in coupling their names together, any other vagaries of the doctor's passed unobserved."
"Then you think he never really cared for her?" I asked eagerly, rather too eagerly, perhaps, under the circumstances.
"That, of course, I cannot say. But shall I tell you my own private opinion, Hastings?"
"Yes."
"Well, it is this, that Mrs. Cavendish does not care, and never has cared, one little jot about Dr. Bauerstein."
"Do you really think so?" I could not disguise my pleasure.